Hi guys, welcome back. Today we're going to have a look at some of my handhelds that I have in my collection, starting from the Game Boy all the way up to the 3DS, different revisions that I have. But we're also going to look at the games that go along with them, as they really are the system sellers themselves. So to start, we're going to look on the right hand side there. That is the original Game Boy, starting with the original fat Game Boys at the back and going down to the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Pocket, which were different revisions. In the middle, there is the Game Boy Advance, which was an upgrade. It was a 32-bit system back then, enhanced graphics and sound. The first generation was the horizontal one. The screen was not lit, so you needed an outside source to be able to see in the dark, whereas the one beside it was the revision for the Game Boy Advance SP. It was a clamshell design. Many consider it the greatest design for a handheld in Nintendo's library. It was very compact and stylish. Plus, it also had a lit screen, so it allowed you to play in the dark. There is also a version that has a backlit screen, which is even brighter and more clear. At the very bottom, you can see the Game Boy Micro. That was the final revision. It was meant for the growing cell phone industry where everybody was carrying it around, so it was a small form factor, mostly meant for Japan, I think. It's very tiny, but the screen on it is very clear. Beside that is Nintendo's greatest selling system, and that's the Nintendo DS. At current value, I believe it was around 152 million of these sold, and countless games, obviously. There is the original one in silver, which is kind of a fat design, and again, it was revised to the DS Lite, which was a very clean clamshell design again with the dual screens, and eventually moving on to the Nintendo DSi, which included a camera but took away the ability to play Game Boy Advance games on it. And finally, on the far left is the current generation. This is the Nintendo 3DS system. There you can see at the bottom that is a new Nintendo 3DS. The one above it is the new Nintendo 2DS, and the one above that is the first Nintendo 2DS, which didn't allow for 3D visuals, but you could play the exact same games. Okay guys, we're going to start off with the Game Boy line of games, starting off with Mega Man for the Game Boy, the original one. This game follows along the same lines as the NES version of Mega Man. Gameplay-wise, it's pretty similar, side-scrolling action game. The biggest difference, due to hardware limitations, there's not as many bosses in this, obviously no color, but it's still a solid Mega Man experience. Next we have Metroid 2, The Return of Samus, obviously the sequel to Metroid on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Again, this game kind of limited by the hardware that it was on, but still a fantastic adventure, pretty big considering that it was on the Game Boy. A really good sequel to the original, and it was also remade recently on the 3DS with new graphics, new gameplay ideas, really well done. Next we have Donkey Kong. This is not the original Donkey Kong for the NES or the arcade version. This follows in the same line, but this has many more levels, definitely more fleshed out, a lot of fun to play. This one also has an enhancement for the Super Game Boy, which a lot of games didn't have. This one gave you additional borders on the outside, plus different color customization. It was really quite neat. Continuing on, this is Pokemon, the Special Pikachu Edition, or the Yellow Edition as a lot of people call it. This one is pretty regarded by Pokemon fans. I'm not a huge Pokemon fan myself. My son plays them more than I do, but from what I understand, this is one of the better ones in the series, and really, this is where Pokemon got its start, is on the original Game Boy. And my last Game Boy game that I'm going to show today is Snow Brothers. So you might recognize this from the NES version. Snow Brothers is a very expensive, kind of sought-after game for collectors. This is also a fairly pricey version for the Game Boy. The gameplay is similar. Is it the most exciting game around? I don't think so myself, but it is a neat addition to the collection. Moving on to the Game Boy Advance, we have Metroid Zero Mission. This is a remake of the original Metroid on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Obviously upgraded with enhanced visuals, color, better sound, gameplay is tweaked a bit. This is the definitive version if you can get it. Next up is WarioWare for the Game Boy Advance. This continues in the WarioWare series. It's a series of crazy little mini games that roughly take like 5 to 10 seconds to complete. Really quite wacky, but a ton of fun. Some of the Game Boy Advance ones were actually the best in the series. Next we have Mario Kart. Yep, another Mario Kart series on a different handheld. This one was the Mario Kart Super Circuit. Very closely related to what I would consider the Super NES version, but actually even upgraded from there. Really quite ahead of its time when it came out. It's still a lot of fun to play today. Continuing on, we have Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga. This continues in the series of Mario and Luigi as far as RPG games go. This is not a platformer like traditional Mario's. A lot of comedy in this, very good storytelling, good gameplay. A lot of people really enjoy this version of Mario and Luigi. And my final Game Boy Advance game I'm going to show today is one of my personal favorites that was on the Super Nintendo, if you've seen my review, and that's Blackthorn. So Blackthorn, again, is a side-scrolling, kind of platforming, puzzle, adventure game, similar to Prince of Persia. This is pretty much the same version that you're going to find on the Super Nintendo, just with the visuals downgraded a bit, but the gameplay is still really solid and really fun. Okay guys, now we're going to move on to the Nintendo DS line, probably Nintendo's most successful line ever, selling over 152 million consoles, and I don't even know how many games, definitely a lot. We're starting with Mario vs. Donkey Kong Miniland Mayhem. This is a puzzle game where you use the touchscreen to guide Mario through different levels, trying to get Pauline back from Donkey Kong. It's very fun, very challenging in the later levels. Takes quite a bit of thinking. It's not your typical Mario platforming game, that's why I like it. Here we have Final Fantasy IV. This is for the Nintendo DS as well, obviously. Nice to see Final Fantasy coming back to a Nintendo console after quite a while being gone. It's a really good game, and it's really good to have in your collection if you can find it. Next we have Kirby Canvas Curse. This was obviously another Kirby game, but this one was a little bit different because it used the stylus to draw certain things to help Kirby reach the end of his goal. There's quite a few games at this time that were trying to utilize the DS's touchscreen in different ways, and this one was one that was unique in the way that it approached trying to finish the game. This one is probably one of my favorite games on the DS, and it's Tetris DS. To me anyways, probably the greatest Tetris game that I've played, just because the gameplay on it was fantastic. The mix with the Mario characters, Nintendo characters, was a really nice touch, but there's so many interesting game modes. A lot of them are a lot of fun. I actually would really love for this to be ported to the Switch somehow. Hopefully one day it will be. And finally for the DS we have Pokemon's the Soul Silver version. This is a collector's version that has the Pokewalker in it. This version is complete and mint. These go for quite a bit right now if you have them complete in box, especially with the Pokewalker. That's kind of what everybody's looking for. The game itself, I believe, is a remake of an earlier Pokemon game, and it apparently is a very well done one. And here we are with Metroid Samus Returns. Like I mentioned in the Game Boy part, this is a remake of Metroid 2 on the Game Boy, and this was pretty much improved in every way, from the graphics, the sound, the controls, different gameplay styles. There's definitely more to explore. Probably the definitive version of that game, and one of the best side-scrolling Metroid games there is. Next up we have Xenoblade Chronicles 3D. You can see at the top, this one is specifically for the new Nintendo 3DS. It was one of the very few games that came out that needed that specific system in order to run. It will not run on the older 3DS or the 2DS. The game itself is a port of the Wii Classic and is fantastic. If you have a chance to play it, you really should. Next is Persona Q Shadow of the Labyrinth. This is another Japanese RPG. Persona is very highly regarded in Japan as one of the premier role-playing games out there. Very quirky, very different style from the traditional RPGs. This one is no exception, very well done. Here we have the Mega Man Legacy Collection. This is the collection that was released on all the different consoles as well as the Nintendo 3DS. This version has Mega Man 1 to 6 included on it, the original NES version. This version also has some extras. I believe you can look at different artwork, wallpapers, things like that. This version also came with a gold Mega Man amiibo. That was the collector's edition, but you could also buy this game by itself. And finally, this is Shin Megami Tensei 4 for the Nintendo 3DS. This is the collector's edition. Comes with the game, a booklet, I believe a different CD in there. Another role-playing game out of Japan. The Shin Megami Tensei name is very big in Japan, very well respected, and that is the reason that this collector's edition was made. So one last game I'll show you guys, and this is kind of a bonus because I don't consider it coming from a handheld, but I think it's marketed as a handheld to this day, and that is the Virtual Boy. This game is Mario Tennis, one of the games of maybe 30 or so for the Virtual Boy, and it essentially is just tennis. It's not a bad game, but it's not a great game by any means either. So I just wanted to show you this just to see what an actual Virtual Boy cartridge looks like. And guys, that's about it. I'm not going to go through the consoles individually. You saw them all at the beginning. Obviously I have different variations. One day I will make a video and go through individually with more games specific for that system, but I just wanted to give you a brief overview of the handheld systems and games that I have right now in my collection. Obviously it's going to continue to grow, hopefully, and when it does I will do some more videos. So anyways guys, if you like this video, please hit the like button, leave any comments below, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks.